So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So, and I got a little message over here that was very exciting. So my attention is back to you now, so don't worry. So I'm going to actually do something this December called Vlogmas, which is kind of awesome. So I'm going to try and go live every day for December. And actually, I'm going to do more than try. I'm going to go live. But I thought today we would start, since it's December 1st, it's time for the holidays. People are like all up on Starbucks drinks. And maybe you'd like to save some of that money. Buy yourself something nice. I don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a gingerbread syrup. So you can use it in coffee, tea. You could use it in warm milk. We're going to use a maple syrup base, but you could also use different sweeteners. If you are refined sugar-free and you feel that maple syrup is a little too refined for you, you could use date syrup. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. But let me let you, and I see some people are here, so do try and comment. Ooh, and my little film strip moved. So I'm supposed to see all the comments and things that are coming from you guys through eCam, even though I'm using this new program called Restream. New to me, not new to the world. So what we're going to do in here is we are going to put about a cup of maple syrup. And like I said, you could use date syrup, and that's not quite a cup. But you know what I'm going to do with this too? Let me tell you. I don't waste a drop of maple syrup. Maple syrup is precious. Somebody took it out of a tree and boiled it down and did all the things. So it was very, so I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to make sure the lid is really tight, which I don't think it's going to be, so I'm probably going to switch lids. But I'm going to turn this over in a jar, save the last few drops. Because a jar like this can cost like $18. So I'm going to put a little bit more in here. And you need to keep this syrup after we make it in the fridge, just like you keep open maple syrup. And let's say you're not a coffee drinker. And you can also make this in the Instant Pot, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we've got like 1 cup of maple syrup. We've got a little more than 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh ginger. And I know I'm going to get the question, we'll talk about some alternatives in just a minute. But you guys, that smells so good. I'm going to put about, what do I have here? 9 allspice berries. Now these are really big. And sometimes, and I'm going to go ahead and actually start this, and I'm going to cook it on about medium-high heat because we're going to infuse this syrup. So I have 2 batches. Let's see if we can get this where you can see it a little bit better. It's okay, we're straining all this stuff out. That was an allspice stem. See how some are small and some are big? It's 2 different batches. So if yours aren't big like these, they're still fine. So an allspice berry, as well as cloves, are spices. So if you notice, they're not green, they're not herbs, they're not a leaf. And it's okay if you get a fresh clove that doesn't have the little ball in it too. And depending on how fresh your cloves are, you can actually overpower things. So we're just going to move this around a little bit. And there's only one other ingredient I want to infuse into our syrup. So what I mean by infusing, and I'm not getting any comments, so I may, if you're asking me questions, I will go back to all the platforms and go and check and look in case it's somehow not working. I was told it's supposed to work. So what we're doing, infusing is kind of like when you make tea, right? You heat up the water and you steep the tea. So basically we're heating up this maple syrup, we're steeping in the ginger, the allspice, the cloves, and what we want to do is like let it really soak in and give the flavor to the maple syrup. And to do gingerbread syrup, in my opinion, you need some molasses. We're going to put a couple of teaspoons in there. And even if you choose to use date syrup, if you have some molasses around the house, I'm probably using about 1 to 2 teaspoons. And if you want this full recipe, you can get it on my blog, plantbasedinstantpot.com. Just either at the top or to the lower bottom right-hand side, there'll be a little magnifying glass. If you click that and you actually type in gingerbread, you'll find this really easy. I'm just doing this on the stove or the induction burner so that it's easier for you to see what's going on. And honestly, it takes about the same amount of time. So if I was here all by myself, I would be like, yeah, Instant Pot, because it's hands off. But also I'm getting this lovely smell. And one thing you can do as you're doing it this way is we can do this, and actually I'll be a grown up and I'll use a tasting spoon. So you can kind of taste it. Already just the maple syrup with the molasses makes this really dark, rich flavor that really kind of screams of winter. That alone, because one of the best parts about gingerbread is that molasses undertone in it, in addition to some of the spices and the ginger, obviously. So one question I usually get is, can I use ground allspice and ground cloves and maybe even ground ginger? And I'll tell you, you can. But I don't really want you to. So here's the deal. If you were snowed in at your house and that's what you have, or you need it right now, go ahead and do it. What's going to happen is you can actually add, and I'll let you see what's going on here, you can add a little bit of that to your coffee now, just a little bit of maple syrup, a little bit of all those things, maybe blend it in a blender. But those spices, ooh, let's get the, ooh, let me take it off. I got a little too high, so see, this is why we're watching it. We do not want the maple syrup to boil over. So that is one thing too to notice, is that if something starts to come up too fast, just take it off the heat. And that will help solve your potential disaster as well. I kind of have an arch nemesis relationship with my induction burner because it doesn't work like anything else that I use. So we're just going to stir it a little bit. I'm stirring this just so it doesn't boil over, and because I want something to do while I'm talking to you. And what I would be doing if you were here is pouring you a nice cup of coffee. Or if you don't drink coffee, this syrup works really great in black tea or rooibos tea if you don't do any kinds of caffeine. It also would work well, just like I said, just maybe in some non-dairy milk, heated up for like a flavored, fun milk. You could do that in oat milk and it would be pretty awesome. See, and now that I have it on low, it's not freaking out quite the same way. And we're not really cooking anything here per se. What we're doing, like I said, is we're infusing. So we want the maple syrup, once I strain it, to not taste like maple syrup or even like the maple syrup molasses blend that I just did, right? We want it to then have those flavors of ginger, that bright flavor, that robust clove flavor, and some allspice all together. And so in doing that, what we're doing is basically, again, like we're steeping tea. So I'm going to bring this to almost a boil, you know, a simmer is really what I'm doing. And then I'm going to take it off the heat. I'm probably going to let it simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes while we're talking. Then I'll take it off the heat, and typically what I do is I let it cool all the way before I strain it or do anything else. I'll just sit it aside and let it kind of just relax, chill out, get a little more extra flavor, because that's why if we're steeping a black tea, we only steep it for X amount of minutes because it becomes too strong and the tannins leach out everywhere. But sometimes if I'm doing like an herbal chai or an herbal cinnamon tea or something like that, I actually let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes just so all that yummy goodness really gets in my tea because it makes me happy. And hopefully this will make you happy too. And like I said, there are some alternatives. Also, if you're just kind of wanting to make a gingerbread coffee, I have a slow cooker recipe for that on Healthy Slow Cooking. So you could actually make up a batch and you could have it ready to drink all day long. Now, if you're like a super picky coffee drinker, that's probably not what you want to do. But you might not want, if you're that into your coffee being perfect, you probably aren't putting gingerbread syrup in it either. Just saying. So that's what we've got here. And I thought while it's kind of simmering, I was hoping I would have more questions, but I thought I'd show you real quick because I get a lot of hits on my blog this year because people aren't going to coffee shops the way they used to. This is how I make my cold brew coffee. And actually, I can sort of show you this so you can see there's coffee grounds in there. And this is reusable, which is kind of nice. And so I fill up my thing about half to 3/4 of the way full with coarse ground coffee. If you have espresso grind or something that's super, super fine, it's just going to go through the holes and make you very unhappy. So if you already have like some normal ground coffee you got at the supermarket, that'll work just fine. And so then just fill it with water and then let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. You can do that either in your fridge or if it's cool in your house, like I keep it like an ice box, you can leave it out because it does have a lot of acid in it, so it's not going to go bad. What you do after that is you strain it. So you could do this in a mason jar. You could just put the grounds and the water in and then strain it through a fine mesh strainer after it's sat for 24 to 48 hours. You can up or lower the amount of coffee to increase the concentration in your cold brew coffee. And what I want you to do is not go out and spend $10 to get fancy cold brew coffee. Go ahead and spend $10 on really good beans and make cold brew coffee for a long time, more than a month. It's certainly more than a week, even if you're a power drinker. So with the iced coffee, so I'm a big cold brew coffee fan and I drink iced coffee pretty much all year round. But if you want to make cold brew coffee, one of the reasons to make cold brew is that the acids are not as strong. So if you have some stomach issues with it, then you probably can drink cold brew coffee if you can't drink hot coffee. So that's one good reason to do it. Another is it takes a lot of the acid taste out of it too. So like my friend Jenny Field, she likes her acid flavors. Thank you very much. As she has taught, she goes, I can see why some people might like it. And that some people is me and my belly. My stomach is not fond of hot brewed coffee anymore. But so there's lots of good reasons to do it. But if you make cold brew or you buy cold brew, though I might shame you ever so slightly about that, I understand. But literally coffee and water in a jar and strain it. And so like when I'm talking about a fine mesh strainer, I'm talking about something like one of these guys. And you can use a nut milk bag if you have it, but I find this just to be so easy. And this is how we're going to strain our syrup too. So it's just a nice thing to have around. And so all you'll have to do is then just strain it. Then once you have the concentrate, the cold brew concentrate, you can heat some up per serving as you want to have a hot coffee. You can put that coffee concentrate into a slow cooker and make pumpkin spice lattes or gingerbread lattes, and you can get those recipes on healthyslowcooking.com. if you just go up to drinks and syrups, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff because I make a lot of syrups. And I'm going to let you see this real quick again. So you can see we don't want to reduce it too much. But I'm about to call that about done. I think that we have been heating it for 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to turn off the induction burner, and then I'm just going to take a hot pad and let this sit here. So we could strain it now, but we're going to lose that extra little bit of oomph that we're going to get. So I'm going to let it sit until it cools all the way. Also, it's just a little safer because if you're using maple syrup, date syrup, or even if you chose to do a combination of like brown sugar and water or something like that to make the syrup, which you could do. You could use white sugar and water. You could just infuse the water and just use that as an herbal tea or a tincture kind of thing. So there's so many different ways you could do this. But any of those sugar ways, if hot sugar gets on your skin, it's going to burn. So let's just not do that. Let's start December off a really happy way by not burning ourselves. And so this is really pretty much, other than straining, you're kind of seeing it all right now. And I could go ahead and strain it. Let me grab a bowl. I will go ahead and strain it just so you can see the full process and you don't feel like I've just left you hanging. And if I burn myself, you can laugh. No, you won't laugh. So I'm just going to put the strainer over a bowl. I'm going to get a bigger spatula. And I'm just going to pour this in here. And I'm going to scrape every last drop of maple syrup out of here. Just in case you were wondering. And so this is what you end up with, is all the different herbs and spices in here, and all the delicious infused maple syrup in here. So I'm going to taste it. Wow! It's actually way more infused than I thought it would be at this point. That's so good. So, you're not a coffee drinker. You're not a tea drinker. Why should you make this? Wow, the ginger infused really fast. I always kind of go to the side of caution and I'm like, let's just let it keep going. So you could also make pancakes, waffles. You could drizzle this on oatmeal. You could do anywhere you want a lot of flavor and a little bit of sweet. This would also be good drizzled over like a baked sweet potato. So there's a lot of different ways you could go with this. And I would probably use 1 to 2 tablespoons in a large iced coffee. You might only need 1 tablespoon if you are doing just like a mug of coffee. But here's the thing. This recipe is for how I like it. So if you taste this after you make it, excuse me, I think I need to drink some more water. And you're like, there's too much cloves in here. That lady's crazy. Don't put so much cloves in it next time. Make a note. What I want to do is give you a base recipe to start with. Then I want you to make it your own to your taste. Maybe you wish it had twice as much ginger. Put twice as much ginger in. Maybe you hate allspice. Leave it out. You could leave out the molasses if you have some strong feelings about it as a sweetener. But even if you have any around the house and just put a little bit, it's going to really change it from tasting like ginger syrup to gingerbread syrup. To me, that's one of the keys. Another thing you could do, and my friend Jenny Field would do this, is you could put a little bit of salt in here too to like brighten up some of the flavors and make some of the things pop a little bit more. If you don't use salt, Don't worry about it. I tend to not put salt in my syrups either. So you will be able to watch the replay. What we did is we made gingerbread infused maple syrup, gingerbread syrup made with maple syrup. I'm like, how many times can I say syrup? It's starting to sound weird. Does it sound weird to you? Because I think it sounds weird. But we made gingerbread syrup. We just happened to infuse maple syrup instead of using a combination of water and either brown sugar or white sugar, which you can do. But for a more whole food plant-based version, you could also infuse your date syrup, okay? If your date syrup starts to cook down too much, go ahead and add some additional water. That's my tip for you. And I would love it if you would come over to Vegan Recipes, Cooking with Kathy Hester private Facebook group. Join us. It's a wonderful community, and show me the picture of your coffee. I want to see what gingerbread syrup you make. Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow.